Okay, hello everyone. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and we are here today with my friend Connie, Teresa, and my daughter Sonia. Hey, Sonia. And we are working on the text of A Course in Miracles, and we are on chapter 11. And let's see, we left off on, we finished section 4. The inheritance of God's Son, and now we're on section 5, the dynamics of the ego. And let me just go there. Mix up the ego. Okay, paragraph 1. No one can escape from illusions unless he looks at them. For not looking is the way they are protected. There is no need to shrink from illusions, for they cannot be dangerous. We are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system, because together we have the lamp that will dispel it. And since you realize you do not want it, you must be ready. Let us be very calm in doing this, for we are merely looking honestly for truth. The quote-unquote dynamics of the ego will be our lesson for a while, for we must look first at this to see beyond it, since you have made it real. We will undo this error quietly together and then look beyond it to truth. Okay, so we were just discussing a little bit about how in the ego thought system, it's dualistic. So the ego will say, well, there's unreality, but there's always an opposite. So there's reality and it has an opposite, which is unreality. Okay. But what this is saying here is, look, unreality is an illusion. Okay. and, um, and illusion is not real. Okay. But if you believe it, it's going to be real to you and you will not be able to escape it, because you're giving it the power of your belief. Okay. And so what it's saying here is, look, we want to escape from illusions. Okay. And we want to let go of the duality, because only reality is true. And the mind is going to be confused and in conflict and in fear as long as it holds on to that dualistic system, which is the ego thought system. So we, let's see. Yes. So the reason why we want to look at the ego dynamics, quote unquote dynamics, is because not looking at them is the way they are protected. So you could say that we hold them in the unconscious mind and they exert power into what we project onto the world, and we miscreate that way. But it's very reassuring, because it says, look, you don't need to be afraid here. There's no need to shrink from these illusions. They cannot be dangerous because they're not real. Just because we believe in Santa Claus does not make the illusion of Santa Claus real. So it's not dangerous. These beliefs are not dangerous. We're ready to look more closely. And we have the lamp, and the lamp is that light within, which is the Holy Spirit in our right mind. And once we recognize, I want to, I want the truth. I don't want to be stuck in conflict and in fear and in darkness. I don't want any of that. Once we decide, then we're ready to look at this. So we must be ready. Okay, so let's see. It's there. Those dynamics of the ego will be our lesson for a while, because we actually have to be able to look beyond them and let go of believing in them to be able to to come to the light, which is within. Okay, and so that's how the error is undone. Okay, number 2. Sonia?
What is healing but the removal of all that stands in the way of knowledge? And how else can one dispel illusions except by looking at them directly without protecting them? Be not afraid, therefore, for what you will be looking at is the source of fear, and you are beginning to learn that fear is not real. You are also learning that its effects can be dispelled merely by denying their reality. The next step is obviously to recognize that what has no effects does not exist. Laws do not operate in a vacuum, and what leads to nothing has not happened. If reality is recognized by its extension, what leads to nothing could not be real. Do not be afraid, then, to look upon fear, for it cannot be seen. Clarity undoes confusion by definition, and to look upon darkness through light must dispel it. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's very, direct for me. Basically saying, hey, you can't avoid it. You have to look at it directly to see that it's not there at all. Yeah, that none of the thoughts or beliefs that come from fear are not real.
Yeah, it's a little bit like a child that thinks there's a monster under the bed. Okay, and so he's going to be afraid of it as long as he believes there's a monster under there. And to help him look under the bed and see that there's nothing there would just dispel the fear. Okay. And so the mind makes up images that are not real, and they're very scary because they say things that are not true. And just like the monster under the bed. And so, okay, because it's an illusion. So the illusion is the source of fear. It's made up, it's imaginary. And they're thoughts that we have accepted as true and have not questioned that acceptance. And that's what we do when we look at them, because by being willing to look at them, the light that we bring with us is what will just dispel them. Okay, and so let's see, because let me see. Because what the mind does is it takes these thoughts and it splits them so that we don't see the contradiction, the contradictory nature of them when they're split. And when we bring them together and look at them together, we see that they're just nonsense, and the mind can then just not take them seriously and not believe in them, and poof, they vanish. So the next step would be then to recognize that what has no effects does not exist. So ultimately, that would be the ultimate step, would be to let go of the belief in the ego and the ego thought system, because it doesn't exist. Yeah, and then, line 6, laws do not operate in a vacuum, and what leads to nothing has not happened. So the ego thought system has led to nothing because it's an illusion, and therefore it has not happened. So the next step would be the acceptance of the atonement. Separation never happened. There is no ego. What are we doing talking about ego? Well, there's no such thing. So if reality is recognized by its extension, what leads to nothing could not be real, because only love can be extended, because that's the only reality of what God is, and everything else is not real. So do not be afraid. Clarity undoes confusion by definition. Okay. Okay, number 3.
Okay. Let us begin this lesson in quote unquote ego dynamics by understanding that the term itself does not mean anything. It contains the very contradiction in terms that makes it meaningless. Dynamics implies the power to do something, and the whole separation fallacy lies in the belief that the ego has the power to do anything. The ego is fearful to you because you believe this. Yet the truth is very simple. All power is of God. What is not of him has no power to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do I stop there? Let's see.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, so when we talk about the ego, Connie, we tend to see it as something separate in of itself, simply by talking about it that way. but what it's saying here is, look, the term itself, ego dynamics, is a contradiction. Okay, because the ego is just a thought. It's a thought of separation. Okay, it has no power in and of itself. The issue comes when our mind believes it and gives it the power of its belief. Okay, then it gives it power to manifest and to project images that then seem to leave our mind and be the manifestation of this world of physicality. And then we think that world of physicality has power to hurt us. So that's how we set it up, to believe that the ego has power when it doesn't. Because it's all coming from our own error in thinking. Okay, there's several errors in there. One, thoughts cannot leave the mind, but when we project, we're actually thinking that they can. And of course, the thought of separation itself is not real. It's an insane thought, because it cannot happen. It's impossible. So the only reason why the ego is fearful is because we believe that it has power to do something. And this, this is making it very clear. All power is of God, period. Okay. There is no other power. And what is not of him has no power to do anything, because there is nothing that is not of God. If God is everything, there can be nothing else. And all power is of God. So, okay. Number 4.
When we look at the ego, then, we are not considering dynamics, but delusions. You can surely regard a delusional system without fear, for it cannot have any effects if its source is not real. Fear becomes more obviously inappropriate if you recognize the ego's goal, which is so clearly senseless, that any effort on its behalf is necessarily expended on nothing. The ego's goal is quite explicitly ego autonomy. From the beginning, then, its purpose is to be separate, sufficient unto itself, and independent of any power except its own. This is why it is the symbol of separation. I mean, this really upsets our whole thought that we're an individual unique from God. It's just saying basically the ego is nothing.
Yeah, it's
It's
a
a total
delusion.
delusion. And so there's no need for fear about it because, it's a delusion.
Yes. Now here's the thing though. The thing about delusion, okay, is that it can be fearful because we can believe that the same mind, that we can lose our sanity. That's the thing that's fearful. Okay. So so the belief that I can go insane is what is the fear, because what I'm believing is that my mind can change and not be the way that God created it. And so in order for that to happen, there has to be something that is separate from God that can go against God's will, and change God's creation. So there's a lot of error, in that thinking there. And so there's a lot of confusion. So once the mind accepts all those errors, it becomes really confused. And and we have all experienced times when we feel very confused, and it's very disorienting. So that's very fearful, because it's like we don't have a clear bearing. Even like a simple thing, like you park, like one of these big department stores, and you go in and you didn't make a note of where you parked, and then you come out and it's like, oh my God, where is my car? So for a second there's just a little bit of panic, because you see all these hundreds of cars, so there's that sense of feeling lost, and so that's very scary. So it's this it's and so that's really the basis for the fear in the ego thought system, is that it has no absolute reference point. Everything is relative, you know so I have to make a mental note of where I place my car in relationship to the building I'm going to walk into, or because otherwise, if I make a mental note and say, oh, hey, I parked next to this black, SUV. Okay. I'll see that when I come out, and that car is gone. Your whole reference point for where you left your car is gone. You see what I'm saying? So the problem with the world of relativity, okay, which is a world of perception, just the way that Einstein described it, is that those reference points are not absolute. What's up and down is completely different once you get up into outer space. So and so that's why the ego thought system itself is confusing, it's disorienting, and it's delusional. And And the more reason why we want to, let's see, connect to a reference point that's absolute, which is truth. So yes, and so, and you know, and think about the ego's goal here, number 4. It's ego autonomy. What the heck is it talking about? Okay. I mean, that itself, right? Here's the thought that is not real. And now it has a goal to be separate from reality. Well, it doesn't even know reality. I mean, anyway, you can just see that all of the thoughts are just out there. So, and to take them seriously is very confusing, you know. Okay, so number 5. Oh, my turn. Okay. Every idea has a purpose, and its purpose is always the natural outcome of what it is. So everything that stems from the ego is the natural outcome of its central belief. And the way to undo its results is merely to recognize that their source is not natural, being out of accord with your true nature. I said before that to will contrary to God is wishful thinking and not real willing. His will is one because the extension of his will cannot be unlike itself. The real conflict you experience then is between the ego's idle wishes and the will of God, which you share. Can this be a real conflict? Okay. So what this is trying to point to us is that conflict is not real, okay? Because the ego thoughts are trying to make the impossible possible. They're idle wishes, and because they're idle, they don't do anything. They have no real power to do anything. So, you know, we can wish all we want, and a lot of it is fairy tale stuff, you know. We got into a lot of the Walt Disney stuff, which is, um, uh, you know, kissing a frog is going to turn the frog into a prince, you know, or that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is belief in magic and stuff, but basically, the will of God can have no opposite. It can have no opposition. And for that reason, any conflict that we experience is never between the will of God and something else, because there is no something else. Okay. The conflict we experience is always between ego thoughts that oppose each other. Okay. But they're both ego thoughts. So even though they oppose each other, they're the same because they're ego thoughts. They're not real. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, so all of the beliefs of the ego do not have a natural source. They basically loop around and become their own source, because that's the goal. That's the goal of the ego, to be self-sufficient. You know, and it reminds me of what Einstein said. Nothing was, let's see, he said, nothing, no, not. No beginning, no end, only transformation. So that's just a loop. Okay, transformation is just a loop. No real beginning, no real end, just a loop. You know, transformation, you know, ice, you know, you boil it, turns to water, turns to steam, condenses back, freezes, you're back to ice. So it all just loops around itself. And that's what perception is. That's what the idea of energy and consciousness is. It's kind of a self-enclosed loop. Okay, number 6.
Yours is the independence of creation, not of autonomy. Your whole creative function lies in your complete dependence on God, whose function he shares with you. By his willingness to share it, he became as dependent on you as you are on him. Do not ascribe the ego's arrogance to him who wills not to be independent of you. He has included you in his autonomy. Can you believe that autonomy is meaningful apart from him? The belief in ego autonomy is costing you the knowledge of your dependence on God, in which your freedom lies. The ego sees all dependency as threatening and has twisted even your longing for God into a means of establishing itself. But do not be deceived by its interpretation of your conflict. I can see what you were saying about the self-sufficiency thing in line 7. Because, I can relate to that. I keep thinking, oh my God, I have to be self-sufficient, I have to provide for myself. I have to make a living somehow. I gotta, do all this. But that's just the belief in ego autonomy trying to make itself, trying to create itself when it can't. But I think I do need, I don't quite understand line 8. I do understand that ego sees all dependency as threatening, but I might need an example for how it's twisted even your longing for God into a means of establishing itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand.
So, for example, the longing for God would mean that we are not self-sufficient, right? That it would say, oh, I need God, okay? But what we do is we make substitutes for God. So we make idols, or we make substances, or that we worship in place of God. And we say, oh, yes, I've had an experience of ecstasy, or so even the longing for God, which is a longing for wholeness, oh, okay, can be confused and mistaken with maybe special love, with maybe believing that I can complete myself by having a partner that's another body. And therefore I don't have to feel incomplete. I can feel like that longing for God has been satisfied. So there's a lot of ways that we try to deal with the longing for God, because that's really a call to the spiritual journey within, this longing for God. Okay, because once we experience that emptiness, or that that sense of the world is not giving me happiness, it's not, or it's not satisfying completely. Once we begin to question what the ego can provide for us in the world, we begin to look for another way. And that's basically the beginning of the end of the ego, because our allegiance to the ego is is not there anymore if we're looking for another way now. So the ego wants to definitely take all of those things that would turn us into the inward, a journey for truth, and wants to find a way to keep us from going there and keeping us stuck looking for love in all the wrong places, basically. So yeah. So it's interesting that, freedom and dependence go together here. You see in the same line here in line 7, the belief in ego autonomy is costing you the knowledge of your dependence on God, in which your freedom lies. Okay, to the ego, that would be like nonsense, because it would say, look, freedom is independence. Okay, if you're going to be dependent on God, you're not going to be free. You're just going to have to obey everything that God says. You're going to be a little slave. You're not going to be able to do whatever the hell you want. Okay, because that's what freedom is. It's being a body that can just do whatever the hell it wants and then not think about the consequences. Okay, even though there's going to be consequences, you don't even consider them. So, so the dependence on God has nothing to do with imprisonment, which is what the ego would have us believe. That's why, it keeps saying, well, you got to be independent, self-sufficient, because that way you are unlimited. Okay, which is not true in the world. No, it doesn't matter what your position, your status, how much money you have. You can never be completely unlimited, because as long as you're identified with the ego and the body, you're going to experience limitation, period. So, true freedom lies in dependence in God, because dependence on God means that that we are completely provided for, because there's no separation, and God is everything. So we are everything, and we can lack nothing. So there's no need for quote unquote self-sufficiency. We're self-sufficient unto God as everything. So there's no thought of scarcity. There's no thought of survival, okay, because we're not a body, we're eternal spirit. There's no fear of having to provide for our safety, because there's no death. There's no concern, there's no worry about protecting the body from deadly viruses, from car accidents. So none of that comes into the mind, because all those are ego thoughts based on the belief in being a separate ego body. And so the mind is free of conflict. It lives in peace. And remember that inner peace is health. So it's healthy, it's happy, and it's completely provided for. It gives and it receives. So there's never any loss. Okay. All right. Let's see. Any questions? I think we're going to need to stop here, but
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's really that first part of the paragraph that, God is equally as dependent on us as we are on God. Yeah, I think for me that seems like a big piece of it.
Yes, because
yeah,
that God is, yes, because we are co-creators with God. So the power of God co-creates. That's why the mind that is not healed cannot create. It miscreates. So until the mind recognizes its wholeness and its oneness with God, it is not co-creating with God. It is miscreating, and it's reflecting, and it's basically manifesting separation. Thoughts of fear, images of separate bodies and attack and all of that.
That seems like that could also be part of our function then, to co-create.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
whose function he shares with you. That is our true function. Our true function is to co-create. But until the mind is healed, so our function is forgiveness until the mind is completely healed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because until we recognize we're not in time, then we're working to save the world, salvation of the world, because we need salvation, because the mind's not healed, and it does not recognize the truth. So so even though we are not fulfilling our function, the Course says that that we continue to create in truth, in the mind of God. Because remember that the self that is in, quote unquote, in time is also an illusion, because it's an ego body character, that's playing out this script. So it's a drama, it's a dream, it's it's an illusion. So in time, we don't create in time, we create out of time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so unless there's any other questions, we'll stop here and we'll pick up on paragraph 7 the next time.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
Yes. Okay, bye-bye.